If I'm honest, you know that hollow ache, no matter how much you consume, it never fills you. You chase the next achievement, the next affirmation, the next embrace, only to discover that each victory, each compliment, each momentary closeness flickers out, leaving you stranded in the dark. You survive your days, you show up at work and smile at dinner, but inside, a silent voice whispers, "I'm here, but am I really alive?" This isn't about laziness nor moral failing. It's a deeper fracture, an unnoticed cavern inside you that, despite every effort, remains unlit. You've been told to be grateful, grateful for your roof, your relationships, your so-called blessings, yet gratitude doesn't erase the pain of emptiness. You feel ashamed of your fatigue, ashamed even to admit that you're tired, because who are you to complain when so many have it worse? So you swallow your exhaustion, hide your longing for more than mere existence, and carry on as if the void inside doesn't exist. But that void has a voice, and for years it's been speaking in whispers you chose not to hear. It told you that despite your hard work, someone else is drinking deeply from the well of your efforts. While you pour your energy into tasks and people who seem to keep taking, you rarely pause to question why you stay. Are you serving your own growth or fueling someone else's comfort? This isn't a lecture on guilt. It's an invitation to witness a pattern many of us share. We give and give, then wonder why our own cup runs dry. You've read the self-help mantras, advice that promised you'd find yourself through affirmations or heal with positive thinking. But those glossy slogans never reached the root. They treated symptoms, not the wound beneath. And every time you repeated those empty phrases, you felt a flicker of hope, only for it to vanish, leaving you more certain that something fundamental was missing. You asked yourself, "What's wrong with me?" You beat yourself up for not being able to make it work, while the real issue lay in the hidden currents pulling at you. Let's call these currents what they are: mechanisms. You weren't broken because you lacked willpower. You were broken because a system, subtle, invisible, inescapable, has been siphoning your vitality. You've been conditioned to swallow other people's hunger, to believe that your own needs are secondary, even shameful, and when you do manage to clutch a morsel of fulfillment, guilt rushes in to tell you you don't deserve it. Be grateful, they say. You're lucky. You internalize that guilt, and the cycle tightens. Yet, there's something you need to understand before relief can arrive. Your pain is not weakness. It's evidence that you're wired for more than this drained, transactional existence. That aching in your chest, the tightness behind your brow, it's a signal that your soul craves true nourishment, not the scraps tossed your way. It's discomfort, yes, but also clarity. It tells you that you still have the capacity to feel deeply, to reclaim the energy that's been leached from you. So acknowledge it without apology. Validate the truth of your fatigue and your emptiness. Even if the world insists you shut up and be thankful, you're not failing by owning your pain, you're beginning. Because at the end of this journey, you'll realize that your suffering has been your greatest teacher. And by the end of this video, you will understand why your pain is not a sign of defeat, but proof of a profound strength that others have feared in you. If I'm honest, you've been sold a story that everything hinges on your attitude. They tell you to just think positively, to adjust your mindset, and suddenly life will bend to your will. They hand you a glossy promise: grin harder, believe harder, and the world rewards the believer. But here's the truth they won't whisper. You were cast into a role long before you took your first breath. Someone else wrote your part, handed you the script, and told you to play it. Your attitude, your mental gymnastic exercises, those were never the main event. They were the curtain, designed to distract you while the real mechanics churned behind the scenes. Most psychologists won't tell you this. Your supposed choice of who to be was never really yours. You think you decided to strive, to conform, to play nice, But what if you've simply been acting out someone else's hunger? What if every ambition you chase, every piece of praise you crave, is borrowed from the unspoken needs of others? You wake each morning determined to own your power, but whose power are you owning? Your own? Or a borrowed hunger passed down through family, culture, systems that benefit when you remain exhausted and compliant? This isn't cynicism. It's a cold look under the hood. Positive thinking doesn't heal your shadows. It throws a mask over them. It smooths the surface so beautifully that you forget the jagged edges beneath. You plaster on affirmations. I am enough. I deserve joy. And for a moment, you feel buoyed. But the moment the applause dies, the mask cracks. The parts of you you've denied, anger, fear, shame, seep through, because positivity was never meant to carry the weight of your darkness. It was meant to keep you productive, keep you pliable, keep you unaware of whose hunger you're satisfying. Here's what they're hiding from patients. Suffering is not always a personal failure. They'll peddle the line. If you're still in pain, it's because you haven't done the work. This sounds harsh, but it's crucial. Sometimes you're not broken because you refused to heal. Sometimes you were born to stabilize someone else's convenience. You became the designated absorber of discomfort so that the system could function smoothly. You gave up your peace so someone else could have theirs uninterrupted. That is not about morality. It's about survival mechanisms laid down long ago. Think about it. When a child learns to swallow their anger to keep a parent calm, that child never truly chooses calm. They adapt, they learn to stifle. As an adult, you carry that same well-practiced containment, this quiet that feels safe, even when it starves you. You've mastered the art of pleasing, of anticipatory sacrifice, believing it proves your worth. But what if that worth is measured by how little you disturb the comfort of those around you? What if your devotion to good attitude was simply the cost of admission to a game rigged against your authentic self? The illusion of choice is perhaps the cruelest of them all. You're told you can be anyone, do anything, but only if you check all the right boxes, conform to the blueprint. You chase careers you were steered toward, relationships that mirror your parents, lifestyles that match your peer groups, convinced these are your desires. Yet somewhere deep down, you sense a fracture. This isn't me, you whisper. But because you've been socialized not to question, you ignore the whisper until it becomes a howl. Most self-help books won't address this. They sell you strategies to optimize the very pattern that keeps you stuck. They hand you tools to fine-tune your performance in a play you didn't audition for, and every time you try, you feel the friction of interlocking pieces that were never designed to fit. You work harder to think differently, but the more you try, the deeper you sink into exhaustion. Because the problem isn't in your thoughts alone, it's in the hidden structure directing them. Now brace yourself. There's a more insidious twist. The moment you start questioning the narrative, you feel guilt. Who am I to reject gratitude, you ask? I have a roof. I have food. I have health. Why should I rock this boat? Here's the paradox. Gratitude is framed as a virtue, yet weaponized as a leash. They say, be grateful and you'll find peace. But they don't mention that gratitude can become a demand to stay small, to accept crumbs when you deserve the feast, to measure your worth by tolerance for discomfort. It's not about ingratitude, it's about honesty. When you force yourself to be grateful while your soul is crying out, you silence a vital cry for change. You tell yourself to settle for less, because someone somewhere declared that less is all you should ever claim. You train yourself to view discontent as a moral failing, when actually it's the first stirrings of awakening. Discomfort is a compass pointing you toward what you really need. If you've ever hidden your resentment behind a polite smile, you know the cost. The knot in your stomach is not just stress, it's the body's way of saying, I'm not okay with this. Yet when you shrug and say, I choose positivity, You betray that protest. You lock it away, and every time you do, the shadow grows, until one day it surprises you in a hot rage or quiet despair, and you wonder, where did this come from? Here's the invitation. Stop fighting the shadow with more shining light. Stop buying the lie that your suffering means you didn't do enough inner work. Sometimes you simply played your role too well. You absorbed the discomfort of others so they never had to face their own. You became the safety valve for stolen power, and if power must be hidden, the valve must never be released. So what if the next step isn't more positivity, but radical curiosity? What if you approached your pain as a teacher instead of a defect? What if, instead of blaming yourself for the emptiness, you traced its lineage, released the loyalties you never consciously chose? What if letting your anger surface isn't violent but liberating? What if honoring your exhaustion is the bravest thing you can do? Most people will shy away from this path because it demands confrontation with truths that are frightening. You'll have to admit that your comfort came at a cost, to someone, somewhere, sometimes to yourself. You'll have to acknowledge that you've been complicit, even if unwittingly, in maintaining a system that thrives on your sacrifice. That's terrifying, yet it's only by naming these hidden debts that you can ever begin to repay them and reclaim the vitality they robbed. But there's something even scarier. If I'm honest, the deepest wound isn't the one you can see. It's the invisible weight you carry because someone else refused to bear theirs. Somewhere along the line, you became the keeper of other people's pain, the silent vessel into which unspoken burdens poured until your own edges blurred. This is the hidden mechanism, the alchemy of power and dependence that turns your empathy into entropy, your generosity into ghostly chains. It works like this. When one person refuses to face their suffering, they unconsciously push it onto you. You absorb it, tuck it behind your ribs, and carry it as if it were your own. And because you have the capacity to hold more, you become the default receptacle for your parents, your partner, your friends, even the collective voices that say, "Don't rock the boat." Think of it as an energy transfer. Each time someone gaslights you into silence, each time a parent demands your care while neglecting their own, each time a friend leans on you without reciprocating, their unresolved wounds slip into your body, your fatigue, anxiety, guilt, shame. These aren't original to you. They once belonged to someone else who refused or could not process them. Yet your nervous system learned early to contain them, to digest them, to behave as if they were normal. So normal, in fact, that you forgot they were borrowed. Imagine growing inside a house built on a foundation of unmet needs. Your earliest job was to keep the cracks from widening, to provide the emotional mortar your caregivers lacked. "I didn't have enough," they said, "so you must provide." That script, written in the hush of their own hunger, was handed to you before you even spoke your first word. You learned that survival meant feeding others emptiness. Your cries for attention were met with relief that you didn't ask for more than your share. And when you finally did ask, if you dared, it felt like betrayal, like turning on the very parent who depended on your compassion. Over time, your body became the ledger where these debts are recorded. You feel a weight in your chest that tightens every morning. You wake with the phantom ache of guilt in your gut. You enter rooms carrying an inexplicable tension, as if scanning for someone else's sorrow that needs tending. You think it's your own, but if you pause, honestly pause, you might feel a faint question. Did I invite this? Did I choose to hold this down? Or was I simply trained from infancy to be the safe space for someone else's chaos? Here's where the mechanism gets even more insidious. Introjection. You swallowed other people's desires as if they were pills you needed to function. You chase success because your father never tasted it. You cling to affection because your mother's love was conditional. You've internalized their hunger so thoroughly that you no longer distinguish your own cravings from their commands. You run toward goals you never consciously wanted, as if pulled by an invisible string. And when you pause, when you finally wonder, do I even want this? You're met with paralyzing guilt. How dare you question what you've come to believe is your purpose? The tragedy is that the more you serve these borrowed needs, the hungrier you become. Your shadow, that part of you bearing the brunt of this trade, grows in the dark corners. The outward you remains polished, efficient, even admired. But beneath the surface, the true you starves. You've been taught that satisfaction comes from giving. To surrender is noble. Yet surrender in this context isn't freedom, it's bondage. You fill the cup of someone else's thirst, and your own cup empties drop by drop. And then there's the rescuer syndrome, a clandestine pact written in subconscious ink. I will bear your pain so you don't have to. I will suffer so you can rest. It sounds saintly on the surface, but in that bargain, you lose your agency. You bind yourself in chains of compassion that only imprison you. Who said this deal was fair? Who decreed that your comfort must be sacrificed for another's ease? The truth is, no one asked you, and yet you accepted the offer because the alternative, watching someone you love collapse under their own anguish, felt intolerable. But here's the irony. By taking on another's suffering, you don't actually liberate them. You enable them. You prevent the natural process of reckoning with pain, of growing through hardship. You become their anesthetic, muting the alarm that would otherwise force them to face their own darkness. And you pay the price. The anxiety that grips your throat is theirs. The shame that twists your spine is theirs. You aren't just bearing burdens. You're collateral damage in someone else's unresolved story. So how does this cycle break? Not with more self-help cliches or superficial affirmations. Healing begins with witnessing, noticing the subtle signal that suggests this pain might be external. When you feel that familiar pang of exhaustion, ask yourself, whose voice is this? Whose sorrow am I holding today? Trace the feeling backward, like a detective following footprints in the sand. Sometimes you'll discover a parent's voice urging you to work harder, a partner's silent expectation that you just handle it, a friend's casual demand that you keep smiling. Next, practice boundary awareness in the body. Close your eyes and imagine your skin as a membrane. Feel where it ends and the world begins. Breathe into the areas where tension clusters, your shoulders, your jaw, your chest. Envision exhaling someone else's pain, releasing it into the air as smoke. Let it dissipate without guilt. Notice how your own heartbeat steadies when you stop carrying invisible cargo. Then comes the hardest step, resisting the lure of the rescuer. When someone leans on you, listen, not to their complaint, but to your reaction. Do you feel a spark of obligation, a girding tension in your chest? If so, that's your signal to pause. Offer empathy, yes, but not at the cost of your own equilibrium. Say, I hear your pain, and I want you to find someone who can help you process it, not just me holding it for you. It may feel cold at first. You may fear abandonment or recrimination, but demons thrive in darkness. Bringing them into the light dissolves their power. This work is not about becoming callous. It's about learning solidarity with your own soul. It's discovering that by honoring your boundaries, you actually model for others how to do the same. You teach them to bear their own load, to find their own resilience, and you reclaim the energy that was always yours to begin with. We all carry shadows, but the heaviest shadows are the ones we never cast ourselves. They are the ones imposed upon us by voices that told us to be strong, to be selfless, to hold more than we could. Recognize that your fatigue and guilt are not your identity. They are echoes of someone else's unspoken tragedy. They can fall away when you learn to ask, who am I beneath this borrowed sorrow? By the end of this section, you will see that the psychology of one's fullness at another's expense is neither mystical nor magical. It is the simple, devastating consequence of roles unexamined and boundaries unheld. And once you spot the mechanism, you can begin to dismantle it. You can choose to carry only what is truly yours. You can set down the borrowed burdens and stand upright in your own power. But there is still something more terrifying waiting: the realization that the world as you know it relies on these hidden exchanges. To question them is to unravel a tapestry woven deep into family trees, social norms, and cultural expectations. To follow that thread could leave you naked in a storm of uncertainty, and yet it is only by facing that storm that you will find the sun. If at this moment you recognize that these invisible debts are being carried in your bones, if you feel the tremor of truth echoed in your own chest, then subscribe. Let these words reach everyone who's been swallowing another's hunger, everyone who's ready to stand in the fire of their own shadow. Hit subscribe, and the algorithms will guide this revelation to those who dare to face the darkness within. If you've followed this far, you've already glimpsed how the hidden depths of other people's pain have hollowed you out. Now, let's descend deeper, beyond the surface patterns, into the architecture of the unconscious itself. It's here, in the dim corridors of your psyche, that the true forces at work reveal themselves. The shadow, the projections, the silent agreements that bind individual wounds into a collective tapestry. The shadow, the exiled self. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of you that you've banished in order to be accepted. You learn early that anger isn't polite, that desire is dangerous, that grief is a burden. So you tuck those parts of yourself into a closet, locking the door and pushing the key far, far away. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It festers, it whispers, and worst of all, it fuels the very behaviors you think you've renounced. Imagine the shy child who was scolded for expressing frustration. That child learned that anger meant rejection, so anger became the forbidden emotion. But because the emotional energy cannot simply evaporate, it turns inward, into self-criticism, depression, self-sabotage, or it erupts in moments of explosive rage that shame you even more, feeding the cycle. Now, layer onto that the shadow of those who fed off your compliance: parents, partners, institutions. They unconsciously needed you to stay placid, agreeable, unobtrusive. Your anger would disrupt their comfort. So you learned to bury your fire. The more you buried it, the cooler you appeared, and the more deeply others relied on your cold conformity. Every time you suppress your true reactions to keep the peace, you reinforce the power of the shadow. You validate the story: my truth is too dangerous. Better to keep it hidden. And every time you plaster a smile over resentment or swallow a sigh of exhaustion so someone else doesn't have to face discomfort, you feed the shadow's dark hunger. But here's the paradox. By rejecting the shadow, you also reject the source of your authentic power. Anger, when honored, can become the fuel for healthy boundaries. Grief, when felt, can collapse the walls you've built around your heart. Desire, when acknowledged, can illuminate the path to your deepest purpose. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your unclaimed energy waiting to be integrated. Projection, defending the oppressor. Projection is the psychological mechanism by which we attribute to others the parts of ourselves we cannot accept. You've seen it countless times. The colleague who screams at you for being too competitive, the friend who accuses you of selfishness, the partner who calls you cold. In truth, each of them is mirroring back your disowned traits, your own competitiveness, your own moments of selfishness, your own fear of intimacy. But there's a more insidious twist. You often project not just onto strangers, but onto those who hold power over you. You absorb the messages of authority, the boss, the parent, the cultural norm, and turn them into internal voices. When your critic says, "You're not enough," that's not their personal judgment. It's your own self-judgment you've handed them to carry. when you feel unworthy because the world demands perfection. You're carrying a collective projection, an impossible standard you agreed to uphold. Even more paradoxically, you sometimes defend the very forces that oppress you because they feel familiar. You lionize the perfectionist parent's standards as your own values. You recite the cultural script of constant productivity as patriotic duty. You believe these norms are truly good because you've internalized them so thoroughly. In doing so, you become the guardian of your own chains. The collective shadow, society's hidden price tag. No individual psyche exists in isolation. There is a collective unconscious, a realm of shared symbols, stories, and shadows that every culture carries. The collective shadow demands a sacrifice. Someone must bear the discomfort so that the majority can feel normal. Across societies and eras, certain groups are pushed to the margins, economically, emotionally, politically, to preserve the balance for the dominant class. Your personal experience is a microcosm of this. Just as a family demands a scapegoat child, society demands scapegoats too. The person who carries extra emotional labor at home mirrors the individuals and communities who shoulder disproportionate burdens in the world: immigrants, the working poor, the mentally ill, the traumatized. When you learn to carry someone else's anxiety so they can maintain their composure, you are enacting that collective pattern on a personal scale. Recognizing the collective shadow doesn't mean falling into cynicism. It means seeing that your private struggle is part of a larger human story. The structures that rewarded your compliance, economic systems, cultural narratives, family legacies, were built on unspoken debts. And unless we bring those debts into the open, they will simply be passed along again and again. You are neither victim nor villain. It's tempting, after uncovering all this, to swing to extremes. I am a victim of ancient powers, or I am the villain who colluded in my own destruction. But neither is true. You are the carrier of an inherited imbalance. You did not ask to be the receptacle of other people's pain, and yet once it began, you did the best you could to survive. Survival, in many ways, demanded that you become invisible. You learned that the world rewarded those who did not complain. You learned that your worth was measured by your ability to absorb hardship without breaking. That adaptation saved you, and likely saved those around you from immediate harm. But adaptation is not destiny. You can honor that survival strategy without remaining bound to it. Tension loop. And here comes the most painful truth. Just when you think you understand the depth of this psychic architecture, there's a truth far more unsettling. The genuine transformation you crave will demand that you reclaim every piece of yourself, integrate your shadow, dismantle your projections, and face the collective debts you've carried. This is not a one-time epiphany. It's a lifelong commitment to truth, a commitment that can shake the very foundations of your identity, your relationships, and the systems you inhabit. And here comes the most painful truth. Your healing is not just a personal journey, it is a radical act of rebellion against the forces that shaped you. In choosing to integrate your shadow, you threaten the old scripts that demanded your compliance. In reclaiming your power, you disrupt the invisible economy of sacrifice. In insisting on your own nourishment, you challenge the belief that only certain people deserve to be fed. This is terrifying because it means the ground beneath you may shift. People you love may resist your awakening. Institutions that once supported you may tremble at your refusal to play their game. The identity you've wrapped yourself in, the self you thought you knew, will fracture as new, more authentic patterns emerge. But there is no other way to live fully, no amount of forced positivity, no deeper self-help technique, no fleeting success can substitute for the integrity of wholeness. And the shadow you've feared will not swallow you. It will call you home. Once you embrace this work, nothing is the same, and everything becomes possible. If I'm honest, there is a predator and a victim inside each of us, two voices locked in an ancient dance. One feeds, one is fed upon, one claims the power that belongs to another. The other sacrifices pieces of itself for the predator's survival. We carry both roles, sometimes within the same breath. On Monday, we consume another's tenderness to soothe our hunger. On Tuesday, we pour out our own lifeblood for someone else's comfort. And until we acknowledge that duality, our lives will remain scripted by forces outside our true will. You've been taught to celebrate kindness, generosity, selflessness. But what happens when these virtues become compulsions? When the rescuer within you can no longer distinguish between healthy compassion and self-obliteration? You extend your hand until it trembles. You give your heart until it cracks. You swallow your own tears to keep someone else's storm at bay. That is one face of your truth. But on the other side lives another face, the part of you that devours. Not in grand malice, but in quiet convenience. You take more than you need, credit, attention, energy, and often without noticing. You've learned that satisfying your own hunger is a birthright, because every time you laid claim to your desires, you saw the fear in another's eyes. You sensed their panic at having to bear their own darkness. So you concluded, it's safer to stay hungry here, to let them rest. My need can wait, yet that bargain has a cost. The predator inside you starves too, because it can never be fulfilled by stolen crumbs. It demands more, pushing you to pursue recognition, success, intimacy, each time with the quiet justification that you're simply claiming what's yours. And each time you hold out your cup, you risk drowning the one who poured it, perpetuating the cycle. Here is the unvarnished truth. Until you recognize both predator and victim as parts of your own soul, you will play out a story written by others. You will chase goals that satisfy someone else's hungers, while you remain empty. You will sacrifice for people who have no intention of tending your wounds. You will devour the compassion you never taught yourself to savor. Acceptance of your own shadow is not a path to instant healing. It is a reclamation of power. You don't cure the predator or annihilate the victim. You integrate them. You learn to hold both hunger and compassion in the same breath. You grant permission to your fierce self to demand justice, while assuring your wounded self that it is safe to rest. Sometimes healing looks like saying, enough, even if it feels like betrayal. Even if your heart trembles at the thought of another person's anguish. There are relationships you must leave so that your love doesn't rot beneath the weight of unspoken debts. There are obligations you must relinquish so that your soul can breathe. Saying enough is not cruelty, it is mercy. Mercy for yourself and, paradoxically, for the one you leave behind. Other times, healing is not giving. No more late-night texts, no more emotional rescue missions, no more answering the call of guilt embedded in your veins. You watch someone you love stumble, and you bite back the urge to dive in and fix. You hold space for their failure, trusting that only through their own reckoning can they find true strength. You step back into your own life, reclaiming energy that was never meant to be collateral. And sometimes healing comes when you finally begin to feed yourself. You offer yourself what you once reserved for others: time, attention, care. You sit with your own grief until the tears run raw and honest. You channel your anger into boundaries that protect your peace. You let your desire guide you, and you honor its directions without shame. You learn that to take nourishment is not to hoard, it is to build the foundation from which you can give freely, without cost. This truth is not for the faint of heart. It demands you face the predator you fear and the victim you pity, all in the same moment. It means untangling a tapestry woven by generations, family patterns that praised your sacrifice, cultural myths that glorified your compliance, systems that thrived on your exhaustion. You have to ask, Whose hunger have I been feeding? Whose tears have I been drying? And what would happen if I redirected that care toward myself? You may find yourself alone at first. Some people will resent you for no longer performing your part in their drama. You may hear accusations. You've changed. You don't care. You're selfish. Let those words wash over you, echoes of the roles you once played so well. Your fiercest act of love may be the one you extend to yourself, in silence, behind closed doors. Because on the other side of that silence lives freedom. Freedom from rituals of self-erasure. Freedom from the addictive cycle of giving your life away in search of worth. Freedom from the agony of hunger that never reaches satiation. When you feed yourself first, your curiosity, your rest, your authenticity, you recalibrate the balance. You hold both predator and victim in your hands, witnessing their wounds and their hunger without shame. And then, something miraculous happens. The predator learns compassion and the victim gains courage. The cycle that once chained you loosens. Your life pulses with new possibility. You become your own keeper, a guardian of your energy and a witness to your own suffering. You stand in the light of your own being, neither starving nor ravenous, but whole. Not every soul is prepared to face this. Not every heart is ready to carry both faces of truth. But if you've come this far, if these words resonate deep in your bones, then you are closer than you realize. Closer to a life written by your own hand, a story where hunger is honored and healed, where power is wielded with integrity, and where compassion begins at home. This is your invitation to claim both predator and victim as sacred aspects of your humanity, to feed yourself so you can truly give, to say enough when the cost is too high, and yes, when your heart calls for nourishment, and to walk forward not in fragments, but as a whole soul, shining with a truth that no one can steal. Because the greatest transformation lies not in banishing the darkness, but in befriending it, so that you may step unafraid into your fullest life. And that, perhaps, is a truth few are ready to embrace. But if you are here, you have already begun the journey. If you followed this far, your heart is longing for more than insight. You're ready for action. These practices aren't polished platitudes or empty affirmations. They're invitations to feel, to witness, and to shift the unseen currents that have steered your life. Move at your own pace. Give yourself permission to linger over each step, to honor whatever arises, and to claim the energy that's always been yours. Begin by asking yourself, who am I serving with my exhaustion? Find a quiet corner. Settle in with pen and paper and date the page. Across the top, write those exact words as a prompt. Then simply write, no judgment, no editing, allowing names, memories, and sensations to surface. Record the weight in your chest, the dull ache behind your eyes, the shame you've carried. After 10 or 15 minutes, circle the recurring voices or roles, perhaps a parent, a partner, a demanding job, or even the silent expectation of gratefulness. Under each circled name, ask, why am I carrying this? And jot down whatever answer arises, however illogical it feels. Close the exercise by thanking your body and mind for revealing these hidden loyalties, and take 3 deep, grounding breaths. With that clarity, move into the ritual of introjection release. Recall a belief that feels more like an obligation. I should never say no, or I need that promotion. Track it back in your memory. Whose voice first spoke it? Write a brief third-person narrative. 10 years ago, my mother said. Now, on a fresh page, inscribe that belief in quotation marks. Then beneath it declare, I am not this thought because, and list 3 reasons that affirm your true self. Finally, enact the release. Crumple, tear, or safely burn the paper as you speak aloud. I release what is not mine. On a new sheet, write, Instead, I choose, and affirm what you genuinely want. Rest, honesty, clear boundaries. Having unburdened your mind, anchor the work in your body with a boundary embodiment meditation. Stand or sit comfortably, feet rooted, spine tall, and close your eyes. Slowly scan your body from feet to crown, noting where tension resides. Locked shoulders, clenched jaw, tight stomach. Picture your skin as a flexible membrane between you and the world, breathing light into each tight spot. On the next exhale, imagine that membrane expanding by an inch, strong, resilient, impervious to anything that isn't yours. Silently repeat 3 times, "This is mine, that is theirs." When you open your eyes, wiggle your fingers and toes, and notice how the world feels a little less invasive. Next, invite the part of you that always strives to be good into conversation. With pen and paper once more, draw 2 columns, one labeled Me, the seeker of truth, and the other, Obedient Self, the protector molded by others' needs. Start the dialogue. Me: why do you push me to over-deliver? Obedient Self: because if I don't, they will be disappointed. Me: and what do you fear will happen if they disappoint? Let your pen flow without censoring grammar or logic. Alternate questions and responses until the obedient voice grows quiet or changes tone. Then ask, "What do you need?" Finally, speak words of compassion. "Thank you for protecting me all these years. I see you. I choose to give you rest now." Fold this exchange into your journal as a testament to both voices within you. Finally, turn inward once more with the question, if I stopped feeding other people's expectations, what would I feel? On a fresh page, free write whatever wells up: relief, anger, fear, liberation, maybe loneliness. When the flow slows, list one simple action you can take today that honors this newfound awareness. Perhaps saying no to a request you dread, taking 15 minutes to rest rather than respond, or voicing your perspective in a meeting where you usually stay silent. Commit to it in the present tense. Today, I will. And if you feel called, share this pledge with a trusted friend or in the comments below, inviting witness and accountability. These 5 practices form a tapestry. Begin with freeing your exhaustion, then release beliefs that aren't yours, strengthen your boundaries in body and mind, dialogue with the parts of you shaped by others, and finally, imagine a life unshackled from external demands. You might journal first and embody next. You might tear paper one morning and breathe into your skin that evening. There is no rigid sequence, only your path. None of this offers comfort without courage. You will stir old wounds before they heal. You will confront truths you once avoided. Yet every moment of discomfort is a doorway to your own power. By speaking your fatigue, discarding borrowed beliefs, feeling your boundary membrane, honoring your protector, and daring to stop feeding others' hungers, you reclaim what was always yours: clarity, vitality, and freedom. Your future self, whole and vibrant, is waiting on the other side of these exercises, no longer starving but richly fed. Stand firm in your commitment. This is the work of a lifetime, and every step you take brings you closer to a life written by your own hand. You are not alone in this journey. A community of souls ready to face their own shadows rises with each practice, and together there is nothing we cannot illuminate. If you've recognized yourself in these words, if you've felt that familiar tug of guilt loosen just a fraction, or heard the echo of your own exhaustion reframed as a signal instead of a flaw, then write in the comments below, "I no longer run from pain." Let us count how many souls here are ready to stand in the fire of their own shadows and speak their truth, because this isn't about applause or perfection. It isn't a trophy you win by enduring. It's a simple declaration. I see my wounds, I honor my hunger, and I refuse to keep fleeing. When you type those words, you do more than leave a message. You carve out a small space of defiance in a world hungry to keep you running. You claim the right to your own experience, and you invite others to do the same. Perhaps you hesitate, wondering if it's too raw, too unpolished, too honest. That hesitation is precisely why your voice matters. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the strongest thread we have. It binds us together, reminding us that beneath the facades of composure and the well-rehearsed smiles, we all share the same question. How long will I hide from the storm inside me? When you answer with those 6 simple words, you remind yourself and everyone watching that hiding is no longer an option. Imagine for a moment the ripple effect. 1 comment becomes 10, 10 becomes 50, and soon there is a chorus of voices, each echo a testament that we are not isolated islands of suffering, but a collective chorus of seekers. In that chorus lies power, power to dismantle the false promises that our pain is a defect, power to reclaim the energy we once offered freely to others, power to stand upright, nourished rather than depleted. So write it now. I no longer run from pain. Feel the weight of those words on your tongue as you type them. Notice if your heart flutters with fear or your chest expands with relief. Both are valid. Both are part of the terrain you're learning to navigate. Celebrate that trembling as evidence that you're alive, that you're daring to speak even when silence felt safer. This declaration isn't a finish line. It's an invitation to yourself and to everyone who reads it to step further into the unknown truths that have been waiting for your attention. There will be moments of doubt, days when the old habits whisper at your back, urging you to slip back into flight. In those moments, return to this comment. It's a beacon in the night, a reminder that you chose differently today. And know this, each time you resist the impulse to disappear, each time you honor your boundary, each time you speak your truth instead of swallowing it, you are reshaping not only your own story, but the fabric of our shared journey. You become a living example that it's possible to live from fullness rather than depletion, that it's possible to feed your own soul without starving someone else's. So if you're ready, type, I no longer run from pain. Let us see you. Let us stand with you. This is not an ending. It's a starting point. The path ahead will demand more courage, more honesty, more willingness to feel the edges of your own shadow. But you will not walk it alone. We rise together with each confession, each boundary honored, each moment of integrity. This is only the beginning.